Hello everyone and welcome to my GG episode 7 review video. Major spoilers as always, just click the link in the description if you haven't seen the episode. I'm assuming pretty much everyone has, but just in case, don't watch this if you've not seen GG season 3 episode 7. So first, just a quick note, especially since I got a confessional on it. Will was sick. I think he had COVID for this week, so Soup asks Zulu to fill in, and John hopped into the LMS challenge. And I was pretty impressed with how he did too. He won a few fights. As for the challenge, LMS, I was feeling like decently confident. I'd been practicing a little bit leading up to this because I knew we'd have a PKing challenge, and I maybe put in like 10 hours over a couple of weeks, which I think is like just enough to shake off a little rust, but definitely not enough to get good out of nowhere. And I expected to be able to beat most non-PvP content creators and then lose to all the PvP ones, unless I either like got really lucky or had an amazing fight. First fight, I started right next to Zoe, and I know she doesn't PvP, so I was going for her first. But Foe PJ'd me, and that allowed Zoe to run away. I was pretty confident against Foe. I mean, right away, you can see I feel like I had cleaner switches. I was pretty much consistently praying against all of his attacks, but I don't know, I just got a couple of strong hits on me through prayer. My barrage didn't catch off prayer, and that allowed him to stay in range to DDS me, and, he just dropped me. I was really, really disappointed in myself. I definitely feel like I should have won that fight. And I even coped hard enough that I pulled up the PvP tracker plugin. I'd been using it like actually as a tool to see how well I was doing when I was practicing. And so I pulled it up here and was like, surely I was way ahead in that fight. There's no way that I should have lost like that, blah, blah, blah. The cope. And that was just a terrible idea because it tilted me worse than I already was, okay, because you can look at it and be like, well, I deserved 15 more damage. I dealt half of the damage I deserved to deal. I only caught one of my 3 freezes, including the one off prayer that got me killed. You can cope all you want. It's just at the end of the day, I took the huge L here. So for the second fight, I got 8 sat. I didn't know much about his game skill in general, honestly, and I wasn't sure who he was because he was using someone else's account that was a loner for GG, and I pretty much could just tell this guy wasn't really good at PvP, but he was pretty solid, and I felt comfortable that I was ahead pretty much the whole fight. I, pretty consistently was doing better with prayers, and my goal was just to play safe and guarantee a kill because I knew that I'd performed so poorly and died right away in the first fight that I could not afford to get last. I wanted a kill for the point, and I wanted some placement that I didn't get in the previous round. My next fight was Torvesta, and he was really clean. I guess after the warm-up that he got in the first game, all of his PKing skill just flooded back or something. I think over the entire fight, I had maybe one chance to kill him, and that was if I absolutely maxed through prayer on robes with my DDS, which I hit 018, and I think I needed a double 18, which I think I technically could have killed him, but it was not pretty. Still, I did live for a while, and I knew with a 6th place and a kill that I wasn't going to get last or even last 2 and have that extra vote on my head going into the banning, which was huge because I didn't ever really expect to win. And also, just a side note, Bodhi was so good at PvP during this challenge. He was in the middle of this huge LMS completionist grind he was doing, and he'd been putting in, I'd say minimum 8 hours a day of hardcore LMS grinding every day for a long time already, at least a few weeks, and everyone was terrified of the guy. If he hadn't staffed the dead spec against Torvesta in the last fight of round 2, he most likely would have won that. And then Solo's gear for the first fight with the Morgan's jabs was unreal, and I think that if their gear was more even, Bodhi definitely would have had a good chance of winning that one too. As for Solo Mission and Torvesta, both really good PKers. No surprise that they ended up in the top 3 with double votes. Also wouldn't have been too surprised to see a framed, although he ended up fighting a few really hard fights relatively early in the rounds, so I don't think he did as well as he probably would have hoped. But they both ended up top 3, Solo and Torvesta, which wasn't great because Torvesta was definitely in EVscape's larger alliance, and I couldn't trust Solo Mission to vote in my best interest, which was still, I really was hoping that Framed or Settled would end up in a position of power here, especially Framed since it was a PK challenge, just because I needed more people to get out of EVscape's alliance. And the more power on the other side, or the more power in the hands of someone who I didn't know was going to vote for sure with Framed, was definitely worse for me in terms of my overall game plan. Speaking of double votes, it's time to move on to voting and politics. Because it was a double elimination week, I figured one person from each alliance was going to get voted into the banning. Knowing Eviescape and his side had more votes available, I decided to throw mine in onto Virtuoso and just try to absolutely guarantee that it'd be 1-1 from each alliance. I tried to smooth things over with him as if I hadn't immediately backstabbed him after earning his trust last week, and he didn't call me out right away, but honestly, I fully expected him to line up the votes later and realize what I'd done. From there, Bodhi, and bless him for being, just fair and unallied, put in Zoe and Tasty. That meant someone from Evie's alliance was very likely to be eliminated, and at most, one member from Frame's alliance could go home. Best case scenario, 2 people from Evie's alliance get out, and then that would actually put the alliances back to dead even. And not only would they be dead even, but they'd also be small enough that the people in the middle of the road would outnumber them. So say Zoe and Virtuoso go home. All of a sudden, we've got 3 core members on each side, a couple of floaters who might have a tendency to join with them, and then quite a few people in the middle. And at that point, not only would they be dead even, but they'd also be small enough that the people in the middle of the road would outnumber them, which is exactly what I wanted. 3 people at that point with 11 left is not enough to have a majority to get a vote going. So the alliances would have all of their power taken away, and solo players could then band together, form new alliances, make deals week to week, and that is where the new power would lie, rather than having to just appease the heads of the big alliances like we've had to do for so long. I also learned something very important this week that I couldn't piece together in the previous couple of weeks. Because Tasty lost the LMS challenge and couldn't vote, I was finally able to figure out how everyone voted. Virtuoso got 6 votes. His own, mine, Framed, Settled, 8sat, and one more person. 8sat, on the other hand, got 6 votes. 2 from Torvesta, 1 from Evie, 1 from Foe, 1 from Zoe, and 1 from one other person. Zulu, who was a sub, was the lone vote for Foe, and Tasty had to vote for himself because he lost the challenge. Then Bodhi also won and didn't get a vote. 2 votes were missing. Solo Mission was the only player I couldn't account for, and he also happened to hold 2 votes this week. Unfortunately, I'd already had a conversation with both alliance leaders about not trusting Solo, and they sort of just brushed me off because they each thought that he was on their side. I didn't want to push too hard and risk pulling everyone's attention to me, and also Evie may not trust me anymore, so I just kept my new knowledge a secret. I had to try to figure out, though, where Solo's loyalties really lay, and I wasn't going to have any help doing it from either side of the games. As for the banning, it was a super chaotic Rogue's Den run. I'm really glad I wasn't in it because I haven't been there in years myself, and watching on the Discord stream, it was really obvious that Tasty was going to win. He was by far the cleanest runner. I think he only made 1 mistake, and he finished the fastest by far. From there, it was either going to be Zoe or Virtuoso in second, which to me didn't really matter because they were both in Evie's alliance for sure. Poor 8sat was so lost in there. He and Virtuoso ended up losing, which meant 1 less member from each alliance. It wasn't the 2 from Evie's that I'd hoped to get, but it wasn't the worst outcome either. Unfortunately, this left Framed and Settled as the only 2 NA Alliance members left in the game. And then they maybe had Solo Mission. They no longer had the numbers to be a voting threat, and so I decided to make the risky play of voting with them consistently. I wouldn't have anyone else left once Evie did the math and realized I'd snaked him this week, so I really had no other option. I knew I couldn't trust Solo, but I kept this to myself, knowing that Framed, and by extension, maybe I, would need his help in the future. Frame trusted Solo, and for now, that had to just be good enough for me. At this stage in the game, I was going to need some allies that I could really trust. With 11 people still left, there were going to be a lot more eliminations before we ended up at the final, and I didn't want to be one of those solo people with no friends just sitting there hoping that I didn't get voted in every week. Oh, and one last thing. I got a couple of messages from another competitor during today's challenge. Sadly, I'm gonna have to wait to tell you all what was in them until next week. Thanks for watching.